Well, hello, everyone. This is the villain, Marty Skell, and you are listening to Chillain with the Villain. Last week, we did a Q&A special, which was very popular. People seemed to really enjoy that. But unfortunately, we didn't get round to answering all the questions. So we decided to do a part 2 of our Q&A special. Joining me today, as always, he is the king of the tables. He is the producer of the show. He is Mr. Sam Scott. Samuel, have you got questions ready to go?
I looked at the questions after we were done, and I realized we've unanswered more than we answered. So I think we're just let's plow through. We've got plenty of ammo.
Okay, well, that's a lot. We did get some good feedback from last week's episode. I don't know if you remember, we were talking about Crash Holly, and funny enough, I received a message on the IG, the Instagram, from a friend of mine. His name is Marcus Mack. He's a promoter in San Francisco. And he was telling me about Crash Holly's tryout match with the WWF. So it was in January of 1998. I guess Crash Holly was a APW guy at the time. Roland Alexander, I think that's who ran. They're featured on the Beyond the Map documentary. But anyway, Crash Holly had his tryout match with Vic Grimes. And I guess it was supposed to be before Monday Night Raw on a Monday night. When they got there, it was Blackjack Lanza was in control. And he said, okay, you can have a 5-minute match. Don't do anything over the top. And that's that. But somehow Jim Cornette got the match pushed back to the next night, the Tuesday night, because back then they used to record Raw live on a Monday. Then the next week they would record taped the next day on Tuesday. He said, let's do the dark match the next day. And anyway, Cornette ended up giving them 10 minutes and said, do whatever you want. Marcus Mack sent me the tryout match, and it's pretty insane. Like Crash Holly and Vic Grimes just do like every move under the sun. Vic Grimes, who's like a really big guy, he's like 400 pounds, does a flip dive over the top rope to a chair, which Crash was sitting on, but then Crash moves and Vic Grimes just goes straight through the chair. I think Crash Holly comes off the top rope like 5 times in the whole entire match, just doing all these high spots. And apparently they got to the back and they got hired, both of them, right away. They got offered contracts and both sent to Memphis. And I just thought it was a really cool story. And at the time, Crash Holly was doing like a leprechaun gimmick. His name was, let me look at this, Aaron O'Grady. So yeah, he was doing a leprechaun gimmick, which I guess he thought would help get him into the WWF. Obviously, he didn't know that, in fact, they were going to bring him in as Hardcore Holly's cousin, which I think was better than a leprechaun anyway. But yeah, I just wanted to thank Marcus Mack, because I think I've heard of this dark match, but I've never seen it properly. At least I don't think I have. And I sat there and watched it today, and I really enjoyed it. And of course, we're massive fans of Crash Holly on the podcast. So it's always fun when we talk about stuff on the podcast, and then I have listeners reach out with more trivia and more stuff that I didn't know about or you didn't know about, and then we can share it the next week on the podcast. So yeah, we did get a lot of feedback last week. People did really seem to enjoy the show. And yeah, I'm looking forward to answering the questions once again.
Speaking of Crash Holly, awesome, right? Little guy.
You're right. He is a little guy. And actually, little guys have been kind of a bit of the talk of the wrestling world recently, because The Undertaker has a podcast. I think his podcast is only on Patreon, so he's probably making far more money than we are, I'm sure. He did a Mount Rushmore of little guys or smaller wrestlers. And his was pretty funny because he had guys like Kurt Angle in it and Bret Hart in it and Shawn Michaels. It's kind of like, yeah, I guess they're little, compared to him.
But, compared to him. Yeah, everyone's a little guy. Yeah,
right, exactly. It's like everyone's on the list other than like Big Show and Kane.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of funny, but I thought, you know what? We do a top 5 every week. Why don't we do a top 5 junior heavyweights of all time, or cruiserweights or light heavyweights, whatever you want to call them. So Sam, you know what time it is. It's time for Marty and Sam's top 5. Now, you actually sprung this up to me just before we recorded, so I had to magically come up with a top 5. But fortunately for me, I'm a massive fan of junior heavyweight wrestling. I'm a former IWGP junior heavyweight champion, so I know all about it. So I'm going to take it away with my top 5 junior heavyweights.
Let's hear it.
Number 5, Rollerball Mark Rocco. Now, pretty much all of the classic British wrestling guys from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they would all be what you would consider, I guess, a junior heavyweight. Other than Super Destroyer Pete Roberts and maybe Wayne Bridges, the majority guys were guys built like myself. It was really America that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, influenced wrestling in terms of being massive, big guys. You know, before it was a case of guys needed to be small so they could be nimble and quick. But then during the 70s and 80s, wrestling kind of went in a different direction. And especially the WWF and Vince McMahon effect, wrestlers became bigger and bigger and bigger. But the reason why I say Mark Rocco is because Rocco really influenced the style of jumping around the ring, that high tempo, the high impact, this style of wrestling that we see today. Mark Rocco really revolutionized back in the 70s and the 80s. Plus, Mark Rocco was the first ever Black Tiger. And I think those Black Tiger and Tiger Mask matches really influenced the business. And you know who the second Black Tiger was, don't you?
Nope.
Second Black Tiger was Eddie Guerrero. So
no way.
Big shoes to fill. True story. Actually, at one point, New Japan were talking to me about coming in as, I guess, the 5th rendition of Black Tiger. And I was 100% for it. I was like, yes, I would absolutely, that would be a legit, genuine dream come true for me. Like the first Black Tiger was Mark Rocco, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Second was Eddie Guerrero. I was all for it. Unfortunately, they decided to bring me in as the villain Marty Scurll instead, which, you know, I guess worked out. But I just love the idea of I could be able to do both. Would have been so much fun. Obviously wasn't meant to be. But yeah, Mark Rocco, I feel like I have to bring him up on the podcast. Every now and then you'll hear his name brought up and some people will give him his flowers. But I think overall, typical wrestling fan probably has no idea who Mark Rocco is. So I feel the need to bring him up on this podcast when I get a chance. But yeah, if you haven't watched a Mark Rollerball Rocco match, go back and watch, because that guy was intense. That guy was innovative. That guy was just the real deal. And I would really recommend everyone to go back and watch Rollerball Rocco. My number 4, another British wrestler, and I think it's got to be mentioned, Dynamite Kid Tom Billington. Now, Dynamite Kid, he was a short guy, but he was big. He was super duper jacked, certainly at different points of his career, super duper jacked. But his height, I think you would definitely consider him a junior heavyweight. Talk about Rocco influencing that style. He influenced guys like Dynamite Kid, who then took that style, took it to Calgary and Stampede Wrestling in Canada, took it to Japan, took it to the United States. When the Bulldogs came to the WWF, I don't think the WWF had ever seen wrestlers do this style before. And you go back, and I was just talking about Tiger Mask. You watch Dynamite Kid's matches with Tiger Mask in Japan. Just absolutely unbelievable, revolutionary stuff. Like there's nothing more I can say about it, but this is kind of how I'm basing my top 5 on just how they influence the style of a junior heavyweight. Like obviously I could say who's been the most successful junior heavyweight, and I don't know, I could say Bryan Danielson's been a world champion, a small guy. That would be, you know, a very valid argument, but I'm typically going on how they influence the general style and the scene overall. So Dynamite Kid, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, probably won't get his flowers now because people have, you know, learned about different things in his history and how he was as a person. And I don't think too many people speak too kindly of him now. At the same time, obviously, what he did in the ring can't be denied. My number 3, Jushin Thunder Liger. Now, I think you think about Japanese junior heavyweights, and I think the term junior heavyweight really, I don't know if it started in Japan, but it definitely kind of took off in Japan, and still to this day, junior heavyweights in Japan is a big deal. It's a big thing. And Jushin Thunder Liger, he's got to be considered kind of like the poster child for all of that. When you think of a masked junior heavyweight wrestler, or just a junior heavyweight wrestler as a whole, Jushin Thunder Liger is the top of the list. That's a completely iconic look. What's funny about Jushin Liger, he actually did his excursion in the United Kingdom as Fuji Yamada, and he was wrestling guys like Mark Rocco all the time. So Mark Rocco, my number 5, probably had a big influence over Jushin Liger as well. It's kind of funny how this list is going. But yeah, Jushin Liger, when he came back to Japan in the 90s, obviously he had his run in WCW multiple times in WCW, but he carried the flag for junior heavyweight wrestling in Japan, wrestled all over the world, and just, yeah, I mean, he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. I've got a big Jushin Thunder Liger picture up on my wall, and I got the opportunity to wrestle him a bunch of times, which was just a dream come true for me. So number 3, Jushin Thunder Liger. My number 2, I will consider him a junior heavyweight because he wrestled, I believe, in the junior heavyweight tournaments in Japan, and he was a former WCW Cruiserweight champion. I'm going with Eddie Guerrero. You talk about someone that revolutionized wrestling for the smaller guys. We kind of spoke about it last week, but Eddie Guerrero, I'm pretty sure Eddie wasn't much taller than, 5'7", 5'8"? And for him to be such a good wrestler, so undeniable in the ring that the WWE, that's the land of the giants, were like, we have to put the heavyweight championship on this guy because he's just so good. That obviously speaks volumes about Eddie Guerrero's talents. And just things with Eddie, we've spoken about him a bunch of times before on this, but it just didn't seem like he really had a flaw. He was just flawless at everything. Because normally you'll get a guy that's amazing in the ring and then maybe not so good on the microphone or not so much charisma. You know, there was a phrase that I think Kevin Nash came up with in the late 90s where he said, vanilla midgets. Well, Eddie was far from a vanilla midget. Mm-hmm. And despite what some people say on the Instagram account or social media, people did care about Eddie Guerrero whilst he was alive, because that really winds me up. Right. And numerous people say, oh, you're just talking high about Eddie Guerrero because he's dead. It's like, that's just so ridiculous. Like, well, nearly all of my favorite wrestlers are dead because I'm a fan of classic wrestling. So, you know what I mean? Like, can I not appreciate any of them because you're going to say that? So you think about it right now, the majority of this list, well, Liger's still alive, but Eddie Guerrero, just absolutely incredible. And my number 1, the greatest junior heavyweight of all time, in my opinion, I think it's obvious, Rey Mysterio.
What can you say? Yeah.
What can I say about Rey Mysterio? Who just completely revolutionized that style of wrestling. People look back on the WCW Cruiserweight division so fondly, and I really think that Rey Mysterio was the kind of the figurehead of that, or like maybe the first person that people think of. His classic matches with Dean Malenko, and I could have said Dean Malenko for this list as well, but maybe he was, he's top 10 at least. But yeah, Rey Mysterio, he did the junior heavyweight style, but he managed to do it in a way where he could still tell amazing stories, where he could use high-flying moves to compensate for what he lacks in stature. He just the ultimate underdog. Everyone loves Rey Mysterio. It's pretty funny when you think of Rey, like he's such a great wrestler, such a great babyface, to the point where like he never really had a heel run in his whole entire career. I think at one point when he didn't have a mask in WCW and he was part of the Filthy Animals, they tried to have him as a heel, or at least on like the heel side, but nobody was going to boo Rey Mysterio. It probably would have been fun to see a heel Rey Mysterio run in the WWE. I think that could be pretty fun. It's probably too late now, but hey, maybe he could turn heel. He could join back up with Dominic Mysterio and become part of the Judgment Day. That would be fun. That'd be something different for Rey Mysterio. But no, when I think of junior heavyweight wrestling, I think first and foremost, Rey Mysterio Jr., the best to ever do it. So he's my number 1 junior heavyweight of all time. And I came up with that list pretty much on the spot, by the way. So I know my junior heavyweight wrestling.
Awesome list, man. One person who I was expecting to be on there and wasn't was Brian Pillman, cruiserweight.
I guess so, because he was like when WCW, I think they had a cruiserweight or light heavyweight title in the early 90s, but it was very sporadic. Every now and then they would bring it out, and Brian Pillman was a part of that. But Brian Pillman, 1, he was a pretty big guy.
Right.
And 2, I just don't think he's really well known for his junior heavyweight abilities or his style. He was more well known for that later on with that the gimmick, the loose cannon gimmick that he did in the WWF. So
he never presented himself as like junior. He was always in the fray, and that's actually the part of what confused me. I was like, actually, is he? I think he is, but people could actually say that would be to the testament of maybe why he should be on a list, is that him being a cruiserweight or junior heavyweight, whatever kind of wording you choose to use, that he was just mucking in with the main eventers and the heavyweights like it was nothing. Although Ray, exactly the same thing, right?
Yeah, well, also like the term cruiserweight or junior heavyweight kind of changed over the years, if that makes sense. Like during the 90s, I think the cruiserweight title originally was under 225 pounds, which
that's quite a lot.
Dude,
that is a lot, man.
In this day and age, the majority of wrestlers aren't over 225 pounds. And then when WWE did their when they brought back the cruiserweight or the 205 live, obviously with them it was like under 205 pounds. And the cruiserweight division in this day and age just doesn't really work, because WWE tried to bring it back with 205, but it was just odd because they had 205 and it was like, they'd have these guys that were cruiserweights, but then in the World Heavyweight Championship picture was guys like AJ Styles and Daniel Bryan and Finn Balor, who are the same size, if not smaller than the guys in 205. Like the cruiserweight division worked in WCW when the top guys were guys like Roddy Piper and Hogan and the Giant and Kevin Nash. And then your small guys, your cruiserweights, were Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, Juventud Guerrero. Years and years later, cruiserweight, pretty much the same thing as the heavyweight, so it doesn't really work in this day and age. But New Japan still do the whole junior heavyweight thing, so yeah. But no, Brian Pillman, I probably would not consider him at least not like a famous junior heavyweight. No.
Gotcha. My list might be, I'm playing fast and loose with it then, because my list is more of who I decide are little guys. Mm-hmm. So we'll just see.
That's cool.
Go. All right, so here's my list, guys. Are you tired of feeling unintelligent by listening to Marty's lists with wrestlers that you've never heard of? You want a basic bitch list? I've got you covered. Honorable mention, Crash Holly. If you listen to Q&A part 1, we talked about Crash Holly at length. I don't really have anything more I want to add. Go back and listen to what we have to say about Crash Holly. Awesome. Number 5, we love him. We wouldn't have a podcast without him. It's Marty Scurll. Of course, right? Are you gonna say you don't count? I think you count.
Well, I definitely count. Yeah,
go.
I'm a former IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion. I've won different cruiserweight titles all over the world. So
there we go.
I think I would definitely count. And you know what? I'm going to put myself over. Well, I guess it's your job to put me over, but I'm not your traditional junior heavyweight. I'm not jumping off the ropes and everything else. So typically when you think of junior heavyweight, people think of that like high flying stuff, but it's important to have the guys that can wrestle and be the base for the high flyers.
I was going to say, I'm not going to gas him up because then he'll start off and go on for ages. I didn't even have to say that. You already did. Okay.
Dude, I'm taking a brow beating for like 3 years, okay?
All right.
If no one else is going to put me over, I've got to put myself over. Good Lord.
Oh, man. Number 4, I've got the Hurricane, okay? So, is he good? Are we allowing him?
Yeah,
for
of course.
Sure, right? The Hurricane, you turn on the TV when you're however old I was when I turned on the TV and saw the Hurricane. I'm like, this guy's gimmick is ridiculous. I love it. Like a failed superhero. But yet he's got the moves to back it up. The Vertebreaker. I don't know if he's allowed to do that or something, but remember that? That was freaking awesome. A King move from Tekken 3 as well. Just, one of these cruiserweight or junior heavyweight, whatever the terminology is, where he's got the gimmick, but he's got the moves to back it up. An all-rounder. Like our guy, Marty Scurll. Just all-round, every category, legend.
Former cruiserweight champion in both WCW and WWE.
Yes, indeedy. Love him. Number 3, I have Tajiri. Now, is he... I feel like he's cruiserweight, right? He looks
100%.
like a beefy lad, but I'm pretty sure he's... Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean... He's done the comedy bits. We talked a few episodes ago about when he was with William Regal as an odd pairing tag team. He's got his comedy chops. But in the ring, he kind of portrays himself very differently. He's kind of ferocious, kind of brutal, the mist, the buzzsaw kick. He's just like a really cool dude. And when I just think of like a cool cruiserweight dude who's just kind of badass, Tajiri just springs to mind. Love him. Number 2, I've got Spike Dudley. Okay, now I know he's not like
Not
a cruiserweight or a junior heavyweight, but
No,
is he a little guy?
No, he's a junior weight. Of course.
Okay, I know, but I mean, he's not one who you could kind of say is a logical contender for any kind of cruiserweight championship.
I think
he's my guy, bro.
Oh, I think he was cruiserweight in the WWF, I think. Or
gotcha.
WWE, okay. I'm pretty sure he was, yeah.
Okay. We talk about him all the time. We love an underdog. We love a little guy. We love guys who, with respect, like know their place within professional wrestling. James Ellsworth is another one you could have. Yeah, Crash Holly. He's paved the way for those little guys as well. I mean, real little guys. Just wonderful. He's in so many matches. He's just always a joy to watch. Or actually, I'm going to take that back. Sometimes he takes these bumps where it's not a joy to watch.
No,
he's always doing them. Yeah.
Did you ever see any of Spike Dudley's heel run? I'm pretty sure that's maybe when he was cruiserweight champion, but he went for a run in the WWE. I want to say maybe later on, like 2006, maybe later, where he started wrestling topless and he was a heel. I didn't really watch wrestling at that point, but I know it happened. We should go back and watch that.
Yeah, we probably should. I don't feel like I know exactly what you're talking about. It's not my cup of tea either. I kind of like Spike, not nameless and faceless, because obviously he has a name and a face, but where he exactly was.
Sure.
You know, yeah. So that's just my personal liking, but I didn't get too in depth around that time, like you're saying. Maybe we should revisit it. Maybe we'll change our tune. Who knows? Can you guess who my number 1 is?
X-Pac?
Dude, oh no, he is, isn't he? Yeah. This is the problem. There's so many, because I really wanted to put Taka Michinoku on here.
You could have had him, yeah.
Yeah, but obviously, number 1.
Hayabusa or Great Sasuke.
This is the thing. You could name them all, and it could equally be like, yeah, but no. Yeah. We need a top 20 for something like this, but that flies in the face of a top 5. It's Rey Mysterio. It has to be. Yeah. Of course. Of course. There's so many, man. This was tough to put together.
Yeah, it really is. And just going through these names and some of the names you mentioned, I was like, oh, what about Jamie Noble was another great one. And,
yeah.
You know, like I said, Dean Malenko, just someone that you're just like, oh, you know, and then there's guys from Japan that I just mentioned as well. And it is different as well. Like, for example, Owen Hart was, I believe he was IWGP Junior Heavyweight Champion as well. And Owen Hart was, to me, seemed like a pretty big guy, but I guess it depends where you are in the world and what era and everything else. But again, just putting myself over again, that's one thing that blows my mind is that like I've held the same championship belt as Owen Hart. I think that's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
That's pretty funny. But yeah, we, like you said, we could do a top 20 easily, and maybe we should at some point.
Yeah, maybe. Also, you know Neville Pac? Is he like, he looks like a giant, but isn't he technically kind of like cruiserweight if you go by the old rules?
Oh, 100%.
It just gets so sloppy, doesn't it? With like what you can and can't include.
Pac is like shorter than me, I want to say.
Yeah.
But he's obviously jacked. But yeah, he's cruiserweight. Yeah. He was WWE cruiserweight champion, part of the whole 205 live deal. So, 100% cruiserweight.
We could be here all day, man.
Like Ospreay, I mean, for the longest time, or cruiserweight, but now he's a bit bigger. But I guess, I don't know. Like in this day and age, this is where the list would be difficult, because in this day and age, pretty much every wrestler is a cruiserweight. Like, for example, MJF, who's the AEW World Heavyweight Champion now, if it was 20 years ago, for sure be a cruiserweight. Do you know what I mean? So it's just, it's all variables. In this day and age, we're all cruiserweights, I guess. Other than, like, I don't know, Big Bill and who's big in WWE? I don't even know. But Roman Reigns, he's not a cruiserweight. But
if 205 Live is for the cruiserweights, what is NXT?
Right.
Like the entire roster. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's just the day and age that we're in.
Oh, Powerhouse Hobbs. There you go. There's another one.
Okay.
He's massive. Yeah.
Maybe it'd be easier for us to do a top 5 heavyweights.
People who aren't cruiserweights.
Right. Well, Sam, that was our top 5. Shall we get into this week's questions and not waste any more time? Because I know we have a lot to get to, and we didn't do a very good job of getting through them all last week. So let's get with the questions.
Okay, first things first. So Scott Neil Berry asks, what/when made you decide to become the villain?
It's a good question. I've not had that before, or at least in the last hour. What happened is I went to a charity shop, or a thrift store, as you call them in
Mhm.
America, and I found this book. Really interesting story. It was about this man that went on this adventure, and he tried to create this rocket because he wanted to go to Mars. Amazing story. I can't remember the name of it now, but it was a really big book as well. It was like hundreds and hundreds of pages, and I'd spent every day reading through this book and was so gripped by it, I could not put the book down. And basically, when I got to the end of the book, the last 3 pages of the book had been ripped out. So I didn't get the ending of the story. And it just sent me, as you can imagine, I'm an emotional guy. It just completely sent me off the wagon. I was never the same since. And that was the creation of the villain character.
That, to be fair, would turn anyone into a villain. But at least you used it for your own career and monetary gain, I guess. So well done
Absolutely.
for turning that around and harnessing that emotion.
I still not recovered.
Still haven't recovered. Big Daddy Woo asks, what storyline moved you as a fan?
It's a good question. I mean, I think off the top of my head, I always talk about Brett, but I think the Brett and Austin storyline was just really well done. Obviously, it ended with a double turn at WrestleMania 13. The whole Brett versus America, Canada versus America definitely really moved me. Of course, Steve Austin and Vince McMahon storyline, or the feud. How could you not get gripped into that? There's been a bunch, like the Mega Powers exploding, Hogan and Macho Man. Even when Andre the Giant turned on Hogan, I remember at the time just being like so devastated, or watching it when when I was young. There's been a lot of storylines. I'll tell you which is an underrated storyline is The Rock's feud with Triple H. People don't really talk about. Mick Foley's feud with Triple H. Yeah, there's been a whole bunch of storylines. The old NWO storyline, obviously. Oh, you know what? One that really moved me, if we're saying like moved, probably the Bret Hart and Owen Hart feud, brother versus brother. Brothers don't fight. I think that storyline just so relatable and just seemed so real. And I was 100% invested as a youngster. I really believed it, and really, it was funny because I knew Owen was being a heel, but I kind of liked him for it. You know what I mean? Like I was like, well, Bret does get all the glory, even though I loved Bret. I could understand that. I'm sure anyone can understand of having an older brother and them getting more attention, or them getting to do things because they're older. So I just thought that Bret and Owen storyline was just perfect. Should have led to Owen becoming a main eventer, but obviously we know how that worked out.
For me, well, I will say when Mae Young got to see the hand all grown up, that was beautiful. That came full circle. But it didn't move me as much as when I was a kid and the McMahon Helmsley tyranny fired Mankind. So that actually moved me in that I remember after watching that, I sat in the bath and I was just really down because I believed it. And I thought, that's it. Like, he's never going to be on TV again. And I had the figure of the classic Mankind, the crazy one with the brown. And I was just playing with it in the bathtub. And I was just getting really sad just looking at him in my hand. So that literally moved me. I know.
It's funny you say that, because I remember when like the Helmsley era took over and Triple H was in charge, they did a match where it was The Rock versus Mick Foley, Mankind, in a pink slip on a pole match. So the loser would be fired. And I remember me and my friend watching it, and The Rock ended up winning, and me and my friend legit were jumping up and down, like excited, happy, because we loved
oh my
Rock.
God. Yeah.
We just The Rock was our favorite, but then we were like upset that Mick Foley was getting fired, and yeah, we believed it as well. So I was moved by that as well.
I Love Wrestling Forever 7 asks if you could defeat Gunther. What do you reckon?
Oh, can I defeat Gunther?
Yeah.
I think I wrestled Walter once in a singles match, and I'm 99% sure I would have lost. In fact, I definitely would have lost because it was for WXW. So to answer your question, I guess Probably not. No, he seems undefeated, and he doesn't.
That is true.
Doesn't have to cheat. So
no, there we go.
I'd have to get a job with WWE first as well. So that's going to be an uphill battle.
Boner Rob asks, and Boner Rob, jeez. I feel like you've actually answered this with Big Damo, but what's the first wrestling match you can remember that you watched?
I actually don't know for sure. I tell everyone that it was Finlay versus Danny Boy Collins.
Yeah.
Just because I know that one of the first wrestling tapes I watched was the Mick McManus World of Wrestling VHS, and that was the first match, I believe, on that VHS. But I'm not 100% sure that was the first match I watched. Like, I used to go to my mother's work where her patients had a bunch of wrestling videos, and I would watch them all. I can't actually remember because I was so young, dude. I think I was like 5 years old or something. So, and my memory's really bad. Like, my first memory is from when I'm like 13 or something.
Can anyone really remember their first match? And if you can, let us know. I can't even imagine what it was, but
right.
Yeah, if somebody actually can, maybe someone younger in the audience, or someone who, I feel like someone who obviously got into wrestling later could probably remember if they got into it as an adult, but I can't. Oh man, I couldn't even hazard a guess.
That's like saying what was the first football match you watched, or do you know what I mean? Or the first movie you watched? I don't know. Do you know? The first song that you heard? I don't know.
Do you reckon Boner Rob can remember? Boner Rob, if you can remember, let us know yours. Come on.
Yeah, let us know.
This is impossible, man. Come on. Okay, this is just a string of numbers. I mean, characters and numbers. So I'm going to try and read it out. LBSY 8018 asks, maybe they're a robot. We don't know. Is Fit Finlay underrated? And why do some people call him the best heel of all time, please, Marty?
That question kind of contradicts itself, does it not? Is he underrated? But then some people say he's the best heel of all time. So Fit Finlay, the reason why some people call him the best heel of all time, sort of younger generation that may have only seen Fit Finlay from his like later run, his WWE run when he was with Hornswoggle and stuff. Like that was only just like a piece of Fit Finlay. But back in the day, especially when Fit Finlay was wrestling in England and in Germany, he was a really, really over heel, and he was a wrestling heel, what I like to call a wrestling heel. So he would use wrestling maneuvers, but do it in a heel sense, in a heel fashion, and he would get heat from the way that he wrestled. And sometimes it was just as simple as not letting the guy get up, or just like grabbing a cheek or whatever it might be, and cutting corners, even though people knew that he knew how to wrestle, but would decide to cut the corners anyway. And him with Princess Paula was super duper over and such a great heel back then. So I can see why some people would say he's one of the best heels of all time. I wouldn't say he's underrated. If anything, I think people speak very highly of Finlay. His career in America didn't, he was in WCW, was kind of in the mid card. I think he probably had a way better career in WWE than he did in WCW even, because he was at one point pretty high up in the card in the WWE as like kind of not quite main event, but between like, the upper mid card on the SmackDown roster. And then he had that babyface run with Hornswoggle. So no, I'm a big fan of Fit Finlay. I do see him from time to time, and friends with his wife, and obviously his son David Finlay is super cool, and even Brogan now. I think Fit Finlay, yes, me personally, big fan of Fit Finlay, and I would certainly say that I took some influence from Fit Finlay in my wrestling style. Not trying to compare myself to him, but yes.
I've only seen him from that later WWE run, actually.
And that's probably most people. So that's what they think of as Fit Finlay, But you got to remember, then he was like, I'm sure he was probably in his late 40s, early 50s, maybe during that run. Let me have a look. Like how old? Because he'd also been retired for years because he had that injury in WCW. He was born in 1958. So yeah, in 2008, he would have been 50, right? So yeah.
Was he on World of Sport Wrestling?
Yeah.
Back in the day? I think he was, yeah. I must have seen clips of him as well from them. But M. Bruno, BJJ, asks, which promotion had or has the best tag team division?
Oh, that's a pretty good question.
Yeah.
the best tag team division. Back in, I guess, the late 90s and the early 2000s, All Japan had their tag team like tournaments, and their tag teams a lot of times was like two main eventers together, and it was considered like main eventers would be in tag teams as well. And they used to do this big tag team tournaments where like Masawa would team up with Kawada, whatever it might be, and that was seen as really a big deal and serious. So that comes to mind. I think when you think of tag team wrestling, the WWF in the sort of later 80s, when they had the division of the Hart Foundation, the British Bulldogs, Demolition, the Rockers, that's people kind of look back very fondly on that time period.
Oh, yeah.
And then I guess, even back in the WWF again, when they had, I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago, that whole kind of TLC era, where they had the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the Dudleys, but then they still had like the APA and a bunch of other tag teams going on. So in this day and age, I couldn't even tell you, to be honest with you. I don't know if there's any really strong tag divisions anywhere, really. Like AEW tag team champions are Big Bill and Ricky Starks. In WWE, I think it's a Judgment Day. There's definitely not as much focus on tag team wrestling in this day and age, especially like compared to back in the day when it was the Rock and Roll Express and the Midnight Express. It's not quite like that anymore. And I do think that is a shame, because me personally, big fan of tag team wrestling.
Yeah, for sure. That All Japan thing you were talking about, where they kind of have two main eventers, I really enjoy that. I mean, we had relatively recently RK Bro springs to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some legs there we can use. Maybe we can abuse a top 5 with that. Milk.
Oh, that's five. Cool. Oh, right? I'm
yeah.
Straight away, I'm like thinking, Shawn Michaels and Diesel. There's a whole bunch. I'm not going to ruin it by going through now, but yeah, the main event wrestlers in tag teams. We spoke loads about Rock and Sock Connection before, and that was a very big example of that. So yeah, and it's strange, isn't it? Because so they do doubles in tennis, right?
Yeah, and it's not seen as like a downgrade. It's just
it's still like the top people together. It's not like a lower level tennis player do tags and the main eventers do singles, do they? So it's kind of strange how that is the concept in wrestling, huh?
It is super bizarre. Yeah, I would definitely welcome seeing more main eventers or main event tag teams. But yeah, two main eventers together against two main eventers together, but seeing it more commonly, or seeing those two teams more commonly. I mean.
Well, it was my concept, not to go off on one, but that was kind of my concept with Ring of Honor to make us different from everyone else.
Yeah.
Is what I wanted, where like all our championship belts were kind of on the same level, kind of like how it has been before in UFC, So like a lighter weight belt is not necessarily seen as less than a heavyweight belt. So my concept was we make all the belts. I know it's not necessarily possible, but we try and make as many of the belts on the same sort of level where they're all main event belts, so we can do shows. And I did this where we would have shows where the 6-man tag team titles were the main events. We did that so many times because we had top guys wrestling for them. And now you see 6-man tag team belts and are kind of very low down the card. I'm like, there's no reason why the tag team title belts can't main event, or whatever, the cruiserweight title or whatever it might be, or the pure wrestling title we had in Ring of Honor, or the television title. Like, can we not present these on the sort of same level? And I guess, it's kind of odd in wrestling how it's, different positions on the card. I guess not everyone can main event, I guess.
Well, I like the idea of what you were trying to push, because ultimately I think it should be up to the fans to decide what division they consider the one that they find most popular, and all of them should be given a fair shake. So I actually enjoy your premise. I think that's a good strat. That's really cool. I'd like to see that more. Yeah.
I don't see me getting the book at Ring of Honor anytime soon, but if you people keep tweeting about it, give Marty the book. # give Marty the book, then maybe
who
one
knows?
day.
Stairway to Devon. Exalted One. Spill it, lol. Was that the original plan?
The Exalted One, that was what Brody Lee was in, or Luke Harper in the Dark Order. So I guess at the time in AEW, when I was negotiating my new contract with either AEW or Ring of Honor, they were doing this storyline where there was going to be like a leader or a mystery man for the Dark Order. And I think their plan in AEW was that I would be the leader of the Dark Order. That being said, I don't think this was ever actually told to me. Certainly not from TK. The Bucks may have mentioned something. I'm not sure. But what's funny about that is I want to say, so there was a big early on in AEW in the Dynamite history, like the history of Dynamite, one of the early episodes. Did you ever hear that thing that happened where they went off the show and the Dark Order with all their like minions were beating up the Elite, and there was one of the minions punching Dustin Rhodes, but he wasn't punching him. Like there was, all this footage got put online where he's like his fist is like a foot away from Dustin's head, and it was all like a big thing on the internet, of course. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was the episode that TK or AEW wanted to debut me on. So I think they were pissed off because that thing happened, but it wouldn't have happened had I agreed to sign with AEW and be the Exalted One. But the truth is, if I had signed with AEW, which, maybe I should have done in retrospect, but I actually don't regret that at all, because Ring of Honor it's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be part of creative, that's really, people think, oh, it's crazy at the time. Like, oh, why would you turn down AEW? But I didn't. AEW, they had Kenny and the Bucks and Cody as the EVPs, and I wasn't offered that position or anything else. So I thought, if I go to AEW, I'm just going to be a part of it. Do you know what I mean? I'm just going to be one part of it. Whereas Ring of Honor, I can really be, I can live out my wrestling dream, and I can do something new, and I can, hire all these people that I think have a chance, and I can write wrestling shows, which I've always wanted to do. And also they offer me way more money as well, which is a big difference. But what was the actual point I was trying to get to? Oh, yes. But had I have agreed to sign with AEW, I would have asked them. I didn't want to do the Dark Order thing. Like Brody Lee, who ended up doing it, way better choice than me. Like he fit that role really, really, really well. I'd been in the Bullet Club, I'd been in the Elite, I'd been in Villain Enterprises. If I was going to come to AEW, I wanted to do something new and
strike out on your own,
be on my own for a little bit. You know what I mean? So everything works out for a reason. But I do think that was the plan. So to answer your question, yes, I think that was the plan. But I would hope that had I signed a contract, I would have wrangled my way out of it. And that's no disrespect to those guys; they're great. And Brody Lee, like I said, 10 times better choice than me. So
Alex Borner 13 asks, what did you think of Finn Balor and Edge's feud? Which I don't really remember, to be honest.
I didn't. I don't.
You didn't like it or didn't remember?
I don't know. I think all I would have seen, I think they had a Hell in a Cell match at a WrestleMania or a big pay-per-view, but I don't really have an opinion. I'm sure it was great, but I don't really have an opinion.
Sorry, Alex, we did check it out. What did you think of it?
Yeah.
Let us know. Yeah. V17N Seattle asks, what's the single best storyline from start to finish ever in the history of pro wrestling for you?
So it's funny because when you say greatest storyline of all time, you kind of think of, like, one of the first things that comes to my head is Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. But when you say start to finish, it's like, what was the payoff for that storyline? And was it Steve Austin joining Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 17?
Right.
Which,
do you think killed wrestling?
Which I believe killed pro wrestling. So, so that's kind of, does that take away from the whole
You should think it would.
I don't really know. I'm going to say the greatest storyline. I'm going to say the Bret and Austin feud, just because the way it started was great. Austin challenging the best wrestler in the WWF, and that really put over Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then the double turn at WrestleMania 13, and that led into Austin being the biggest star in the world and changed the industry forever. So that storyline, I think, is as good as any to suggest it's the best storyline of all time.
Yeah, this is a tough question to answer because of exactly what you said. Because wrestling's never just like easy to kind of pluck out. There's always bits that lead up to something, and where do you really cut it or draw the line? So this does require a lot of thought. Now, for me, maybe the best storyline is one that moved me the most, in which case I guess it would be Mankind getting fired, right? But was it the best storyline? Probably not. This is a really tough question.
Well, it's like, the NWO storyline that changed the
Right.
industry, and that, you could argue that started the Attitude Era and everything else. But what was the payoff for that? Like, there wasn't really one. And that the NWO kind of started great, and the first year was great, but then it kind of veered off in a wrong direction. So it's kind of hard to say it's the best storyline of all time. Most impactful, you could maybe say, but from start to finish, the best. I don't know if you could say that.
And there's lots of storylines that I found really entertaining, but would you really call them the best? So, for example, Mickey James, the Stalker, Trish Stratus was a really great storyline. I really enjoyed it. Was it the single best start to finish ever? Perhaps not. This requires more thought, V17 and Seattle. And I believe that we should get back to you on that, because I don't want to throw this question away because it's good. It's good. I'm going to let us cook on this one. Let us cook. Kid Cloud Smoke asks, who do you think should be next in the Ring of Honor Hall of Fame? They say Lethal, Jay Lethal.
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure who is in the Ring of Honor Hall of Fame. I assume the Briscoes are. I think. Samoa Joe might be in it. But Jay Lethal, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all those guys that started out, American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, I think would have to be a shout. There's Nigel McGuinness. There's a whole bunch of guys. I don't know, Jerry Lynn. I don't know. I don't really know what the Hall of Fame is based on, but any of the most famous guys, of course. I mean, I should hope the Briscoes. The Briscoes probably, they're like the epitome of Ring of Honor. They're from the start to the very end. So 100% the Briscoes, but I assume and I think they're already in it. So, right, definitely deserved.
Yeah, if they're not in it, then if not, Jay Lethal. Perfect. Done. Next question. X Dimebag asks, do you think WWE will be able to keep a handle on CM Punk this time around?
I don't see why not. I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. I don't really know how things work there. I don't know CM Punk well at all. So I don't know. I assume, it seems like things are going great right now. I assume it will stay that way, but I have no idea. I don't think it's a case of like, oh, we've got to, take control of CM Punk, but like wrestlers fall out with companies all the time. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it could happen, couldn't it? Do you know what I mean? I don't know if there's going to be chaos and everything else. I don't know if it's going to end in a lawsuit like he did the last time, but I don't know. He seems, I assume that he's very happy there now. I assume they're very happy with him. So yeah, I assume it will go well. And I think I would have thought he would be on I thought at first he'd be on more of like a Brock Lesnar type schedule, but now he's been like on all the shows. He's turning up to NXT, so seems very hands-on. So I don't know. I don't know enough about WWE, and I don't know enough about CM Punk, so I can't really answer.
Well, they and Kate Taters ask for your real honest thoughts on CM Punk, which we kind of touched upon on our War Games episode more recently.
Yeah. Again, I have met Punk probably 3 or 4 times, and always seemed, we always cool to me, always had a bit of a chat, but I've never had to work with him or anything else, so I don't know him well enough to really have an opinion. Back in the day, especially, like, obviously great talker, great draw, has his legion of fans. So yeah, I don't really have anything good or bad to say about CM Punk other than times I met him, he was nice.
From the mailbag, Danny asks, what are your current thoughts on the state of New Japan Pro Wrestling? Has it lost its steam with the international audience since the days when you were in Bullet Club and you had guys coming through like Rey Mysterio and Chris Jericho? And what are your thoughts, man?
I do think that myself and like the Bucks and Cody, Hangman, we never really got the credit we deserved, I think, for getting a lot of eyes on the product. Mm-hmm. Dude, there was a point where we were so over with the Elite and the Bullet Club. You'd go to wrestling shows and it would be 95% the crowd's wearing some form of Bullet Club t-shirt. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like people try to pass it off as, oh, Okada is getting all the fans into New Japan and whatever else. It's like, He probably did, but I don't think they would give us the same credit. It's like we got, the shirts in Hot Topic. We got the things like the Pop Funkos off. We were selling tickets for these shows, and when New Japan was coming to America, then we were doing shows and selling 6,000, 7,000 tickets, 18,000 at Madison Square Garden. Like it was really hot, and I don't know if we really got the credit we deserved, maybe. So I appreciate them saying that. In terms of New Japan today, I haven't seen it in a while. I know Wrestle Kingdom is coming up, so I'll probably check that out. But we all know this, that New Japan clearly needs a villain. So I'll leave it in their hands. Let's start another hashtag. New Japan needs a villain.
Yeah, they specifically asked with the international audience, did Okada really move the needle for the international audience more than you guys? Who knows? I wouldn't say so. I will go on.
I'm not going to take it away from Okada, but all I'm going to say is
a legend.
When you look out at the crowd, were they wearing Okada t-shirts or were they wearing Villain Club t-shirts?
All I will say is you were both represented in Tekken 7. So it's a toss-up, maybe.
I want to say in the year 2017 and in the year 2018, in both years, I had the best-selling t-shirt in the whole of wrestling. I'm going to come out and say that. It was number one. So my original Villain Club was number one in Pro Wrestling Tees in 2017. Yeah. And my Villain Club gold t-shirt, it wasn't called that, but the Villain Club with the gold on it, that was the best-selling shirt on Pro Wrestling Tees in the year 2018. But I'm positive that they were the best-selling wrestling shirts overall, like over WWE or whatever else, TNA or whatever else. Because I've seen the numbers and I've seen the amount of units sold. Dude, like those shirts, I legit had people emailing me pictures of like boardwalks where they sell like bootleg t-shirts and stuff, or you go to the beach or like shops in malls selling bootleg shirts. There would be Villain Club shirts at all these different places like that. Well, for whatever reason, that just took off, and like every Hot Topic around, the world. Like at some points, my Villain Club shirt was selling more than Harry Potter stuff in Hot Topic. That stuff was super duper hot. It's, again, I'll probably never get credit for it, and people just love to talk crap about me and not give me my flowers. But I can honestly say to myself, truthfully say, that I have not just one, actually, two of the greatest selling wrestling shirts of all time in the history of pro wrestling. So take that for what it's worth.
There we go. Hasbro Daft Collectibles asks, if you could go back to one pay-per-view, any company, any era, and insert yourself into one match, what would it be and why?
Oh, blimey.
While you think, mine would be, I wish I was the extra member of the Mean Street Posse and just being involved in that hardcore battle royal, getting my head busted open alongside the legends Pete Gas, Joey Abs, and Rodney. That's what I would do.
I don't know. I don't know if I can top that. Honestly, if I had that machine, I would probably not go to a pay-per-view. I'd probably go to one of the big shows from back in the 70s or something, or the early 80s, and just get to live like that territory, or go to Dallas, Texas, or something like that. Or go to Mid-South. One of those big shows I think would be awesome to go do. But pay-per-view, I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I mean, people often say about WrestleMania 17 being one of the best pay-per-views of all time. So maybe I'd like to be on WrestleMania 17. I guess any of those stadium shows. I will say this. I went to WrestleMania. I think it was at the AT&T Stadium in Dallas, funny enough. And it's like, I don't know, dude, it's like 90,000 people in there or something, or 100,000 people or something ridiculous. And I do remember walking into that building and being like, whoa, like blown away, like almost took my breath away. And I was like, damn, yeah, this would be really cool to perform at, So yeah, one of those stadiums. I mean, obviously I've done the Tokyo Dome a couple of times. It's more like 45,000, and that's pretty damn big. But those big 100-seater, 100,000-seater venues or the stadiums, they're pretty mind-blowing. So that would be cool.
On a similar vein, Andy Witt 80 asks, two wrestlers, dead or alive, so they're straight in with the singles match. It's just That's all you're given. Any venue, company, match. What's your dream booking?
So it can be like any era.
Different eras from each other, yeah.
So like a dream match.
Yeah.
I mean, there's loads, bro. There's so many. I mean, I think top of my head, Eddie Guerrero versus Bret Hart, Eddie Guerrero versus Shawn Michaels, Rey Mysterio versus Bret Hart, Hogan versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. Dude, so many. It's like Mr. Perfect versus Kurt Angle. I could be here all day. All those, like, you know, the great wrestlers from the 80s, and then there's the great wrestlers from the 90s, and then the 2000s, and just, yeah, there's so many. Like Dynamite Kid versus Eddie Guerrero. Can you imagine that? Or Dynamite Kid versus Shawn Michaels, like, or Masawa versus Shawn Michaels, for example. Dude, so, I could be here all day, but yeah, I just gave you a whole bunch, so I couldn't really pick. If I had to pick one, that's really, really, really difficult. But maybe even Brett versus Ray, I just think would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah,
or let's say Shawn versus Eddie. The fear that I have with Shawn and Eddie is that, like, they're both so good that it might be like a contrast, because that's kind of happened before when wrestlers, like, I want to say when Shawn wrestled Mr. Perfect, for some reason it just didn't click. And so, like, your fear would be that could happen. But at the same time, I just think like Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle was incredible, and Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle was incredible. Just peak Guerrero, peak Shawn Michaels, which there's a dispute there. What is peak Shawn Michaels? Because some people say his second run was better than his first. So, you know, you could make the argument. But yeah, those two, I'm just going to go with those two.
Do you feel like there's always a weird niche on YouTube? Do you reckon there's a niche on YouTube where people use creator wrestler systems in whatever game to do these dream matches and do their own little kind of dream fantasy federations? I bet that's a thing, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
There
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, dude, sometimes I'll see something on YouTube and I'm like, oh damn, I gotta watch this match, you know, Mr. Perfect versus Eddie Guerrero. Then I click on it and it's just like,
oh, it's just
yeah.
Okay,
that happens more often than not than you think, actually.
Oh wow, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah. I know people send you creator wrestlers of you a lot.
Yeah, I shared one the other day. It was cool. Yeah, it'll either be the like a video game someone's played, or people are playing with the action figures, or like action figure animation. They've done it, you know.
Oh, like stop motion.
Yeah, but sometimes it's not even really stop motion. It's more just
they're just
a collection of pictures.
Oh, really? Okay. What would be better if they get green washing up gloves, yeah, and then they delete their arm on the green screen program afterwards, fill it back
There's
in.
Actually a really funny story. I want to say Zack Ryder, Matt Cardona. So obviously he's massively into his wrestling figures.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm getting the story right. But he said that when he was like, he wasn't even that young. I want to say he was like a teenager. He filmed himself playing with his wrestling figures, and he put black gloves on to like wrestle, thinking that you wouldn't see his hands if the black gloves were on.
Oh no.
I would love to see this footage. I'll have to.
Me too. Try and get it from him. Because I said what I said as like a joke. It turns out he's actually already tried.
Yeah, he already tried that. Yeah. It didn't take off. Yeah. Dude, I used to dude, some of my greatest memories as a kid were playing with my wrestling figures, and I would book shows back then. I would lay all the figures, like I'd lay my match card out, like put the wrestlers together, the matches I wanted to have, and I would do storylines and I would do the whole thing. And it's such a shame, right? How, because I often think now as an adult, you can't really understand how playing with toys like figures would be fun. Like now, I have some wrestling figures, and I love to display them and look at them from time to time.
But
I couldn't pick them up though and play with it and enjoy it. Right? I'd be like, what am I doing? But when you're a kid, you just have that imagination, and like I said, I would play for hours and hours and have the time of my life. It's kind of a shame that imagination, or whatever it is in the brain that finds that fun when you're young, that leaves you. Like, that's a real shame, huh? What is it that, like, why do you grow up and stop finding those things fun?
Brother, this is like the plot to the movie Christopher Robin. Have you seen that with Ewan McGregor?
What movie is that? Oh, Christopher Robin. Oh, I think I have. Yeah. Christopher Robin. He's from the.
He's the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the movie, he's all grown up and he's like
Hmm.
forgotten about his friends, and then he's like finding his like childhood
I
spirit
feel like.
again.
Yeah, I feel like I maybe have seen that film, but
Yeah. That's what you sound like. It's the plot to Christopher Robin. But I guess it's true. I don't know. Video games I liked as a kid and I still like now. It's weird how some things stay and some don't. Do you think?
But I mean, yes, it is different. But you're right. Yeah, you enjoy them as a kid and still enjoy them as an adult. So, and there are games that you can enjoy as an adult, like you can still play checkers and enjoy that. Board games or snakes and ladders you can still enjoy. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe because with the wrestling figures, it's not really necessarily a game. It's literally just you by yourself pretending that you're wrestling. I don't know.
If you were just in a room with nothing on the windows, no windows, nothing on the walls, just in a white plain room with wrestling figures for a week, by the end of that week, I feel like you'd find joy in playing them again. So nothing else. I think it might be because you just feel like you've got easier ways of getting entertainment where you don't have to work for it. Maybe it's that.
Let's make a YouTube video. I stayed in a white room for a week.
Yeah, okay. I thought you meant let's make a YouTube video of us playing with our wrestling figures with the black gloves on.
No. Yeah. Come on, next question. We're diving off here.
All right, but I will say that era of wrestling figures with the Titantron, with the chip in, that was my era. I had the original WWF where they all did that. Do you remember that one? Which was good stuff. But then that era with the Titantron and more points of articulation was just, it was a dream. It was a dream. All right.
Well, I have every single Hasbro figure, and I even have the Green Card series, the final and last series, and arguably the most rare series. I have all 7 of them mint on card, and I have it framed up on my wall. And that frame with all those action figures got 1, 2, 3 Kid, the Smoking Guns, Yokozuna, Evil Crush, Ludwig Borger, and Adam Bomb. And that all them combined are probably worth. They might have gone down a bit in the last few years, but all them combined, I'm probably looking at $7,000 maybe.
Jeez Louise. Have you been on Broski's show?
His podcast?
Yeah.
Yes, I did a live podcast with them before I did that, and I think I've done a couple of cameos, like years ago though.
Oh, okay. Did you do a tour of all this stuff, or did you not have it at that point?
I had it, but no, I didn't. I probably discussed it on the podcast. I've done a tour of Broski's toy room, and that's really good fun.
Yeah. I bet it is, man.
Yeah, he's in deep with the wrestling figures. Like I've got my Hasbros, and I have a few other wrestling figures from that era, and then I have like a miscellaneous like Japanese section. So I've got like a small Jushin Liger collection. I've got some Tiger masks. I've got like the Great Muta, Abdullah the Butcher, and then some like random figures like of wrestlers I like. Like funny enough, I've got a Tajiri, Kevin Sullivan, Masawa. I have a Tiger Atori figure, Vader, Doink the Clown. Basically, any of my Bruiser Brody, Terry Funk. So basically, my favorite wrestlers. Like I'll have a figure of them, and that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Do you have an IRS?
Well, he's a part of the Hasbros.
So he's Hasbro. Yes, of course. Yes,
I do. In fact, I do have loads of figures. Like I did originally, I was going to collect like a whole bunch more. So I had Jack Specific and some maybe Titantrons and WCW figures and ECW figures. And then I just decided, I was like, this is getting to the point where I'm going to need like a whole toy room to display these.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is kind of like this game doesn't end. You can always find new stuff to collect. And I just thought, why don't I just display the figures that I'm actually really passionate about? And all the other, like I've got like the majority of the bendies. I have a whole bunch, but I was like, this literally, like all my wrestling figures, it takes up one portion of a wall. And I think that's kind of enough. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to turn my whole room into toys.
But you really like the ones that you have, and I think that's a really good stopping point for you.
Exactly. And so it's annoying because sometimes I see figures now because they make such cool retro figures and stuff. I see them and like that's cool, but like I don't know, man. I'm just like I don't want to spend just more money, I guess. I don't know. It's fun to collect, but there's nowhere to stop. So then you just end up spending an absolute fortune. So
I don't see you as a collector in anything. You do collect things, but they're like specific things to you. You know, like I like this thing, I want that. You're not like really like a broad get the whole set kind of guy, are you?
Well, with the Hasbro's, I wanted to do
Well,
mainly
that's one,
because
yeah.
the Hasbro's I did because, well, actually, I have a story about that. The Hasbro's, I wanted to get all the Hasbro's because I had them as a kid and I just loved them. And I couldn't have them all because I was a poor kid. So I only had like a selection. So then when I got older, made a bit of money, I was like, I'm going to go back and buy those figures. But the thing is with the Hasbro's, so there's actually free mail away figures from Hasbro. So basically, in the early 90s, they had the WWF magazine, and you could send like a check or something and get a Hasbro figure in like a little plastic bag. And the figures they had like an alternate Hogan in red. They had a Bret Hart, which is pretty much the same as the Bret Hart figure they already had, and a Undertaker figure, which again was pretty much the same as the typical Hasbro. And I actually bought the Hogan figure, the red one, in the baggie, and I spent like $800 on it or something.
Ooh.
And then, but I had that for a couple of years. But the Bret and the Undertaker, bearing in mind I have pretty much the exact same figure, just not in a bag. They were so hard to get, and they were selling for like $5, $6, $7, or even $8,000. They might even be more now. And I just thought, you know what? Like, I'm never going to spend that money on those figures. Like,
Yeah.
even if I became multi-millionaire, I probably wouldn't spend that money on those figures. So I ended up selling my Hogan figure because I thought it's weird just to just have one. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, I might as well just have the money. Sometimes I kind of regret it, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm never going to spend all that money on that Bret and Taker. So what's the point, you know? But I have all the released Hasbro's, and those ones I just kind of forget about them, you know.
Another thing I feel like you tried to complete the whole set of was those cards, those WWF cards with like the yellow. Because I remember giving you a load that you didn't have. Did you ever complete that?
I don't think so. I had loads of those WWF trading cards and stuff, but again, those things never end. You know what I mean? So
Right.
yeah, I'm not really a massive collector. I don't like to. It's not wasting money, but I just don't like to.
If that's not where your passion is,
right?
Then
yeah.
No, I feel you.
I'd rather spend my money on experience or food or invest in something. So
Fair enough. The only wrestling figure that I still think I have, it's not a figure. It's like this big, and it's really old, and it's Hulk Hogan, and his arms don't move or anything, but he's got a drawstring, and you pull it back, and he says little Hulk Hogan phrases. Feel the power of Hulkamania.
Oh,
Maybe,
you have to show me that. I'll be able to
I wonder if
you.
it's worth anything. Yeah,
it might be. Show me it, and I'll tell you.
Yeah. Luke Brady 3 asks, "What's your favorite memory in Japan?" We kind of touched on this on the Ask Marty Anything, but this isn't wrestling related. This is just generally speaking your favorite memory of Japan.
With Japan, just honestly, so many. Like I actually spoke about it on my Instagram the other day. Just going around Tokyo with my friend Fat Ass Masa, just going to different restaurants, going around to the wrestling shops and selling the wrestling store my stuff, but then buying stuff from the stores. And just going out on all those sponsored dinners were just amazing. Just going out with the boys, guys like Osprey and Ricochet, Dave Finley, and going out for dinners and having a drink and spending all night out and about was just some of the best memories of my life actually out in Japan. So yeah, just the camaraderie, and like Japan is just such an awesome and cool country. Yeah, honestly, I'd really love to go back and make some more memories.
Yeah, for sure. I've only been twice, and all of my stories, though, we like to keep this podcast kind of PG-13 or that thereabouts, but I've got some after dark stories. They're pretty funny. I've got loads of really good memories of Japan. I'm sorry if I butchered this. Cadhar Finley 224 asks, as you guys probably know, contracts in both WWE and AEW are coming up in 2024. Who do you see jumping ship? Oh, very timely. We did a jumping ship a couple of weeks ago. Or going to a completely different promotion like New Japan or Impact. And who do you see staying in their respective companies? and then they add that they think MJF already re-signed months ago and that's one of the reasons why he's AEW World Champion.
I don't know whose contracts are up, so I don't know. Typically with WWE, most wrestlers get released. Most wrestlers don't have their contract expire and then they just leave. That does happen sometimes, but not often.
Oh, okay.
I think it's pretty hard for people to walk away from that WWE money, So I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of guys in WWE that would do great in AEW, and obviously there's plenty of guys in AEW that would do great in WWE. I do think MJF will inevitably end up in WWE one day. All these pictures just came out of him hanging out with John Cena at the Iron Claw premiere. But I don't know when his deal is to. I know he does that whole 2024 thing, but I feel like that's probably a work. But yeah, I could see Ricky Starks in WWE. I could see that happening. Again, I don't know anyone's contract status, so yeah, I think it's fun for wrestlers. It's fun for fans to speculate. You've seen a wrestler in one company, you'd like to see them in the other company. But the thing is, a lot of the times, it's really exciting for the first few weeks, and it's just kind of like, okay, do you know what I mean? Like Edge came to AEW, and everyone's like, oh, this is crazy, but you kind of soon get used to it, right? It's like the wrestling companies, not that they're the same, but wrestling's the kind of same thing, right? And the wrestler's not really going to change that much depending on where he's wrestling. So it's kind of like to watch them debut and maybe watch a first time matchup is cool, but then after that, it's just kind of like, yeah, it's wrestling. You know what I mean? So
Kid Klauswick again asks, what was the OG plan for the Ring of Honor title before you left?
I can't actually remember. I think after I started booking, we had to put the belt on Roosh again, I want to say, because that was already been worked in. So I guess Roosh beat PCO for the belt. And then from there, I don't know. I did want to build up Flip Gordon because he was getting good reactions at the time to have a title match and tell a good story with him, leading in with Roosh. But in terms of the world title, I don't remember. I guess my whole thing was just trying to build up new people, build up contenders, and build up Roosh as a champion, build up Jonathan Gresham, build up PCO, build up Flip Gordon, a bunch of guys, bring other guys in, bring guys in like Nick Aldis, etc., etc. But yeah, the plan for the title, I think it was, I guess, to stay on Roosh. I don't know if I'd fought that far because when I started, he just won the belt. So
okay, I'm surprised you haven't heard that question more.
I think I have, but
okay.
Yeah, I didn't really think. I don't think we really had plans for that. We had so much other stuff to sort out. We weren't thinking who's going to be the champion in 6 months. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, and finally, Ian from the mailbag asks, what is your favorite episode of Chillain with the Villain that you recorded?
Oh, wow. That's
I know.
Actually,
I saved it for last on purpose. I thought it was good.
That's a really great question. There was one podcast which I'm not sure which one it was, but obviously when you start a podcast, it takes you quite a while to find your feet.
Yeah.
And there was one I can't remember if it was episode 10 or something, but one that I just afterwards thought, wow, that seemed to go really well. We seem to be finding our feet as podcasters now. Can you remember which one that was? It the TNA one?
So maybe? I was going to ask, was it the TNA one? Because that was my favorite one. I felt like it was the funniest and that we were at our most natural. Before then, I didn't feel like we had our feet. And that, for me, is the turning point personally. Right. That's my one, the TNA. Yeah, first TNA pay-per-view. And I felt like it was the funniest. And just most interesting if I listened to it.
Well,
it's my most enjoyable one.
The funny thing is, no pun intended, is that obviously we're not trying to be a funny podcast. You know what I mean? No. Sometimes
we're not comedians.
We're not comedians, right? And being a comedian is a very hard job. I know everyone thinks they can do it, just like they think they can be a wrestler, book a wrestling show, but it's very difficult. And I feel like so many wrestling podcasts do try to be funny, and they'll, do fake laughs and just, we keep it real at Chilling with the Villain. We don't do that. But obviously, sometimes the topics we're talking about are funny. Do you know what I mean? Or when we're talking about
Yes.
the Johnsons or whatever.
Yeah, and TNA is such a good example of that.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to be funny. So if people find us funny, then that's really cool. But yeah, that episode sticks out. But I don't know. I enjoy every episode. I really enjoy going back and watching these old wrestling shows and then talking about them. Like if I didn't have a podcast, I'm talking wrestling anyway. So this is, me. I've really enjoyed all the interviews that we've done. I think we've had some really good guests on the show, and everyone's been really honest and given us some great stuff. And like now I've come to mention it, we do actually have a special guest for next week, Sam. I might as well announce it right now. We have someone that has competed in WCW, WWE, AAA, New Japan, and CMLL. Can you guess who it is? Or shall I leave it as a mystery? What do you think, Sam? Or shall I announce it?
I reckon fans will be able to figure it out from just that. Do you reckon?
I don't know.
You don't?
Maybe they.
Well, let us know if you know.
Okay, I'll cut this up. I'll make it a story on the reel and see if people can guess who the guest is.
By the way, really quickly enjoyed the AEW versus NXT episode because it got me into NXT. So coming out of an episode like with something for me personally is also like, I also got to write the script for the first time. Normally Marty does them. But yeah, I got into NXT from that episode. Canadian Stampede we covered, and then I found a like really good pay-per-view that I've never seen before. So they stand out as well.
I done worked on a script, brother. I call it in the ring, bro.
All right, man.
Awesome. Well, listen, everyone, thank you so much for your questions. We were overwhelmed with the amount of questions. We appreciate
Keep them coming.
I love you.
Keep the questions like rolling in, please. We love them.
Yeah. We typically on a normal podcast, we're gonna maybe answer one or two questions in a mailbag section, but from time to time we'll do these Q&As. And just remember, I enjoyed this one because this one was less about me. And even though I spent this whole podcast putting myself over, I do prefer talking about wrestling in general rather than myself the whole entire time. So we got a lot of those questions this time. It wasn't all, when are you going to AEW? So I really do appreciate you all. But Sam, I'll put it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for your questions, and have a good week. Till next week. No. There we go. I got it.